think we all know Visa. Their logo is on 3.8 billion cards worldwide. They handled...
Or in this day and age, credentials.
Credentials, sorry.
Actually could be in your phone as well.
In the world of mobile payments, of course. And yeah, and you guys handled, I think it was 2.8 trillion in payments volume last year, and just a very well-known company. So we're really excited to have you here and appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Another stat that I really like, so you guys have 21,500 employees in about 80 countries. And I know earlier this month you were one of the first CEOs to really offer a frank assessment of just the lengths that you had to go to get folks out of Ukraine and get them to safety. I think you described hiring mercenaries who would go into Ukraine and take folks out, putting Sprinter vans full of supplies at border crossings so that employees could take advantage of that. So I just wanted to check in first maybe there and just hear more from you in terms of how that process is going and also the work you've done with folks in Russia as you wind down operations there.
Well, the prior weekend, I left on Saturday morning and I went to Budapest and Warsaw and visited with our refugee employees in Ukraine. Unfortunately, many of them families that are split up because men between 18 and 60 can't leave the country. And we have employees in both Ukraine and Russia, so this impacted us in both countries. And from the beginning, our number one goal was to get as many people to safety who wanted to be. The reality is today we have about 60 families, so we took care of children, in some cases mothers and fathers, where we did send vans through a couple of different security companies. Almost all our global security people are either in Hungary or Poland right now. And we extracted people when we could. It's getting harder and harder to do. We have about a dozen people left in Kiev. It's going to be hard to get them out at this point. Most of our employees are scattered along the western coast, hoping to stay, hoping not to have to break up their families. When I was in Poland, that's when the base 12 kilometers from the Polish border was bombed, and one of our employees' husband is in the army, and she had been FaceTiming him with him every day, and she went like half a day or three-quarters of a day without hearing from him. And right before I left Poland to head to Dubai to see our Russian employees, she grabbed me and told me that she had gotten a text from him that he was alive, which at least is good news. But it shows the impact this is having. And we're equally committed to our Russian employees. We ended up 2 weeks ago shutting down or suspending our business in Russia. Not an easy decision, but a decision that was driven by three things. One is with the sanctions, it was getting increasingly difficult to operate. Number two, the reality was that we were concerned about this unprovoked war that had been thrust upon the people in Ukraine. And number three, we thought that for the sake of everybody, that an orderly wind down of the business where we weren't forced into it by another round of sanctions that might say, immediately you have to shut down, was in the best interests of everybody. And we subsequently made available to our Russian employees the ability to relocate, and if they relocated, we would give them a job. And in what is quite a statement, we had a town hall with them on a Sunday morning, and by that Wednesday, 70 of them and their families had already moved to Dubai. Today, I believe that, now I didn't get a briefing this morning, but last I knew we were at somewhere in the neighborhood of about 120 employees and their families had migrated to Russia. So we'll see what happens. A lot of these folks are hopeful that they'll get back in weeks. I'm not sure that's going to be the case. I think this is going to be a prolonged battle. I think Putin underestimated the will and the skill of the Ukrainian people. And I think it looks like his own military has not been as strong as he might have thought. So I think this is going to go on for quite some time, unfortunately. But we're going to be there for our employees. This is not something we're into it for 2 or 3 weeks. We're into it for the long term, and whatever it takes to make sure that they and their families are taken care of, we'll do everything we can.
And we're at the Equality Summit, where I think we've heard a lot of companies talk about values. And I know when you made the Russia announcement, you talked about that being a partially driven by the values you guys hold as a company. I guess it would be great to maybe take me to that decision and just walk me through, having the conviction and those values that you talked about, and making that call.
Well, I think, in the first few days, it obviously was upsetting, but as you started to see the ramifications of war, I mean, we haven't seen it nearly this up close before, and the level of coverage, because there's so many media outlets, it's in all of our living rooms and family rooms. I told the story of having been in church a couple of Sundays ago when I normally don't take my phone, but I did because of everything going on, and got a text that President Zelensky was trying to get a hold of me. So I have to say, President Zelensky, I've probably heard from everybody in his cabinet. I mean, they did a very good job of trying to make their case. But obviously our Ukrainian employees were highly upset, and we have numbers of Ukrainian employees around the world. And by the way, non-Ukrainian employees. I was in Washington the last day and a half, and one of the things that was a real theme down there is that the one thing Putin might have underestimated in this whole thing, in addition to the Ukrainian will and skill of their military, is how uniting this event has been. It's really brought not just the NATO countries together, but the world together, kind of rooting for the underdog, and trying to see what they could do for Ukraine. So I think when it all came down to having the facts in front of us and the idea that we wanted to do this in an orderly fashion, that it just simply fell into the category, Jenny, of being the right thing to do.
Got it. I'm curious, I do think we hear increasingly from CEOs employee feedback and like that employee dialogue almost, that drives a lot of these conversations and topics and ultimately decisions. Is that in your experience as well? It
definitely is. Look, the email years ago started to bring down barriers of the assistant who blocked access for you and provided some level of protection for you as a leader. And I think in what is a good sign of our culture, I'm very flexible. I end up most town halls telling people, if you didn't get a chance to ask your question, my email is al.kelly@visa.com. And I do that all the time. And I hear from employees every day on a whole bunch of issues. And this certainly was no exception. I think employees are, I think in good, open companies that are transparent, employees feel comfortable sharing what's on their mind. Doesn't mean I always agree. And sometimes people ask for things that are idealistic. Sometimes I get incredible input of something I hadn't thought about. So, net, I think it's all a very positive thing. And I certainly try to encourage and have as much dialogue down through the organization. Being a CEO can be a very lonely job. And if you lock yourself up, you can find it becoming not just lonely, but isolating. And I never want that to be the case with me. So I try to make sure that I reach out and talk to people, and being able to go and I brought over, when I went over to Hungary and Poland, brought tons of clothes and toys for kids, et cetera, and to be able to hug it out with people who have been through very, very trying and difficult decisions. It makes you feel good. It was emotional, but fulfilling, and it made sense. I actually brought my 18-year-old daughter, who had come with me on a previous trip 3 years ago to Kyiv, and found it to be a beautiful city, which it is. It's a terrific city. And she was on spring break, and she actually asked me, she felt badly about the whole thing, and actually asked me if she could come. And she was a big help, kind of giving out clothing and toys. And I think it was great for me to have her with me, and I think it was a great experience for her as well.
I know another area where CEOs seem to get a lot of feedback is the whole return to the office.
Oh my gosh.
And I think you guys are planning to begin bringing more folks back in the coming weeks. And so I wanted to get your take on this very hot topic right now, and kind of how you're thinking about it, and how you're trying to cajole folks back and get them back into the house.
Yeah, it's not easy. Look, we've learned a couple of things, right, that are undeniable. Most people can do their job from home. Certainly in white-collar jobs. and maybe non-services types of jobs. We've also learned and have to recognize that people like the flexibility. They find that gives them more time with family. It's better for the planet if they're not commuting and burning fossil fuels getting to work. And 53% of our company is millennials, and that kind of, that's particularly important to them. So those, we all have to stand up to, I think all of us as CEOs have to stand up and recognize those realities. However, I do have some concerns about it. I should start by saying what we're going to do is we've told people we'd like to be in the office 50% of the time. And we want everybody in the office on Tuesdays and Wednesdays so that we have clear collaboration days where we don't have to make a bunch of coordinating phone calls saying, Jenny, are you going to be in on Wednesday? No, I'm only in on Tuesday. And Mary, are you in on Tuesday? No, I'm only in on Thursday. I just thought it was kind of wasteful. So we're saying everybody's got to be work 50% of the time in the office, 50% at home, or more in the office, obviously, if you want. And you got to do Tuesdays and Wednesdays. The concerns I have fall into a couple of categories. One is that you need some form of togetherness to build culture. Companies shouldn't be static entities. They need to have some vibrancy to them. They need to have some esprit de corps. They need to have some common view of values. That's what creates a stickiness, that I want to be there. And speaking of that stickiness, the second thing is I want people to be focused on career as much as job. So yes, you can do your job at home, but is it the right thing for your career? So that's very much on my mind. Thirdly, I do think you have to spend some time in the office, especially in a business like ours, where we don't make anything. It's all intellectual horsepower, and we're trying to build capabilities and solutions and design technology for our clients around the world. And getting in and doing a session with a whiteboard, et cetera, it's hard to do that in a situation where you're doing it via some kind of video mechanism. The last thing I'm very concerned about is D&I going backward. I really am worried about it. Minorities will because they're the minorities, tend to be a bit shyer, tend to be less in the mainstream. And that's easier for them and the majority to break through when you're in person, right? Like I could see a minority and go over to their desk and say, how you doing? Even whether it's coming back or going to the men's room, which is something I would commonly do. I commonly walk the halls. So you can't walk the halls on Zoom. It's just not doable. And I think inclusion in particular requires getting people together and grabbing people and say, hey, join me on this meeting or join me on this phone call. And again, hard to do in a video world. And I don't want it to go back. It would be bad if this turns back to a situation where we move backward with women and we move backward with minorities. It would be a horrible outcome. And one of the things I keep saying to everybody is we're not going to know for 10 years whether we made the right decisions or not. I look at our company. When I started as CEO almost 6 years ago, we had 14,000 employees. Now we have 22,000. 5 years from now, we'll have 30,000. That means I need a lot more leaders. And leaders need to get developed. And I believe completely, 100%, that I would never be the CEO of Visa if I worked from home all the time. Because I was gutty, I was gritty, I got my hands dirty, I built relationships, I listened, I went to every single meeting I could, I grabbed people in the hall and asked them questions. I was very curious, and all of that curiosity and relationship building, I think, had a lot to do with me getting ahead, and good fortune in working with good people. So I think that we're all going to have to be very careful. I've told our organization we're learning as we go, and this next year is a learning cycle. By the way, we've also introduced that for 4 weeks during the year, you can work anywhere you want. But you have to do it in buckets of weeks, not days. So you can either do a month somewhere, 2 weeks somewhere, or 4 1 weeks, and you can go to Florida or Utah or Arizona or someplace else, and that's perfectly fine. So we're also giving that flexibility. So we're going to have to see. I'm going to watch it really carefully. If I think that it's going to have negative, I see it trending toward having negative long-term implications, we're going to have to talk about that.
And so what does the office look like I guess, especially given your point about not going to the office and sitting on Zooms all day? What does the office look like in this new learning period for Visa?
Well, I think it's never been harder to be a leader than it is now. Never. In my career, and I started working out of graduate school in 1981. I've said to our leaders that you're going to have to be so much more planful. You're almost going to have to be a grammar school teacher thinking about how you keep that curriculum. I mean, there's nothing. I have a daughter who's a kindergarten teacher, and she has to be super organized to keep 25-year-olds busy for 5 hours. And I've watched her. She plans out every 10 minutes of what the day is going to be like. We don't have to quite go that far, but we have to be planful, because the objective has to be that the days people are in the office, when they are going home at night on the train, the subway, the bus, or driving, they're saying, boy, was I glad I was in the office today. And if they go home saying, that sucked, I could have done everything I did at home, and I had to come into the office, I had to burn commuting time in both directions, people's not going to like that either. So we have to be so much more planful about how we build collaboration time. I think you and I may have talked about meals. I think meals and drinks are an incredibly powerful weapon, because you can't do that via Zoom. So have some employees and bring in bagels, or get pizza at lunch, or go for a drink after work. That by itself will justify being present together. So we just have to be much more planful. It's a lot more pressure on leaders than they've ever had. It's not as easy to call that spontaneous meeting. You really got to think about, okay, what do I want to get done next week? And if I'm going to have everybody on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, how do I organize those 2 days to be great days in terms of collaboration and togetherness, et cetera?
I agree. Never underestimate the value of free pizza. It's
Never.
very powerful.
Free food, man, it works all the time.
That's awesome. Well, and I know, I loved your point about diversity and inclusion and kind of staying focused on that. I think last month you guys announced a really interesting program where you guys are going to put $100 million in deposits with minority depository institutions. And we've seen a lot of different work with MDIs over the last few years. I think a lot of others maybe have done equity investments, but you guys went the deposits route. And I would love to hear a little bit more about that program, but also why go that direction and really put your kind of money where your mouth is? Well,
we've made a very conscious decision to take our D&I efforts on the road, if you will, to the external world. We announced after the terrible George Floyd incidents a Visa Black Scholars and Jobs program, where we committed $10 million. We actually have 50 freshmen in college right now, black students who are, I think they're at 38 different schools. And we'll give them scholarship money for 4 years. And if they do their job in school, they'll have an internship between junior and senior year, and then a guaranteed job when they leave. We've stood up an inclusive partnerships group where we literally, just like any other kind of partner team, we're out talking to minority organizations. At the moment, we started our focus with Native Americans and black business owners. And then we decided, using our treasury capability and our cash, that we would start this Minority Depository Accelerate program, where we have made a commitment to put $100 million to work of our cash as deposits. And what does that do? Number one, it helps a bank build their balance sheet, which is important. And secondly, it's a catalyst for trying to drive lending and inclusive growth. Before we started this program, we made a $10 million deposit into One United in California, a minority-owned bank, and they leveraged that to help support a $150 million affordable housing project that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. So we think we can help. A lot of these organizations are really focused on helping that local community that's not quite in the mainstream. And there are 1.7 billion people on the face of the earth today who are not in the financial mainstream. And some of them are within a mile of here. We kind of tend to think about emerging markets in Southeast Asia, but some of them are right here in Manhattan and other big cities. And it's these minority institutions that are trying to really reach these people. And we have, we're a company that generates a lot of free cash, and this is a great way to try to help them by making deposits into their institutions.
Gotcha. Well, it was lovely to hear from you. Thank you so much. This was great. And yeah.
Jenny,
Al
great to
Kelly.
see you. Thank you.
Lisa.